The US weapon halt causes a shockwave. The confirmed suspension of critical US weapon shipment to Ukraine marked a pivotal moment. Affected systems include Patriot air defense missiles, vital for stopping Russian planes and missiles. Air-to-air missiles for Ukraine's new F-16 jets, essential for air combat. Stinger anti-aircraft missiles used against helicopter and low-flying aircraft. And key anti-tank weapons. This decision, driven by dangerously low US military stockpiles, revealed in internal reviews, has stunned Ukrainian officials who relied heavily on this aid. While a Zelensky advisor publicly denied the halt as Russian propaganda, US officials themselves confirmed it, creating confusion and panic in Kyiv. The weapons being cut off were all commitments made by the previous Biden administration. President Trump has not authorized new major shipments. This situation is unprecedented. While past US wars ended due to costs or politics, like Vietnam straining finances, this is the first time the US has had to reduce support because it literally lacks the weapons to send, exposing a significant limit to American military power. Russian experts view this as a clear sign the US is prioritizing its resource for potential conflict with China and admit it cannot sustain multiple global commitments. This public display of weakness is a strategic signal to rivals like Russia, China, and Iran. Ukraine's desperate position and leadership denial. Facing the sudden loss of its primary weapons supplier and ongoing severe battlefield losses, Ukraine's situation is increasingly dire. Reports indicate Ukrainian officials have grown desperate in recent months, privately asking European visitors about securing a ceasefire with Russia, a stark reversal from previous defiance. However, the top leadership in Kyiv, particularly President Zelensky and his close advisors, publicly reject negotiations and continue to insist victory is possible. This stance is bolstered by the powerful and growing influence of ultra-nationalist groups like the Azov movement, now expanded into multiple brigades, potentially forming army corps. These groups fiercely oppose any concession to Russia, while figures like intelligence chief Kirill Budanov offer realism, admitting lost territories are gone and warning timelines are running out. They are outliers. The US decision, reportedly not communicated in advance to Zelensky, despite a recent meeting with Trump, further isolates Ukraine and suggests a shift in Washington's view of its leadership. Call to the US Embassy and pleas for talks with Trump highlight the shock. MP Mariana Bazuga's declaration that the US is no longer an ally underscores the perceived betrayal stemming from the weapons cutoff. Though diplomatic and intelligence support continues, the fundamental problem persists. The leadership prioritizes political survival and maintaining controls, potentially sacrificing the country's future by refusing to confront the military reality. Europe's inability to compensate and strategic drift. European nations, also reportedly caught off guard by the US weapon halt, face the harsh reality that they cannot fill the void. Experts universally agree that Europe's defense industry is too fragmented, lacks sufficient production capacity, and is too slow to replace the volume and sophistication of the weapons the US provides. While European leaders like France, Macron reiterate strong diplomatic support and promises of continued aid, the practical military assistance they can offer is now drastically limited. Macron's recent phone call with Putin, initiated under the cover of discussing the Iran-Israel crisis, restarted dialogue but reportedly saw him repeat standard demands for Russian withdrawal without offering a new pathway to peace. This highlights Europe's strategic paralysis. Despite understanding the gravity of Ukraine's situation, Hungarian PM Orban revealed he warned Zelensky a month ago about Western exhaustion. Major European powers lack the unity, will, or leverage to effectively push Kyiv towards negotiations or significantly alter the military balance. Their muted response to the US announcement suggests some prior awareness, but also an acknowledgement of their inability to act independently. Europe finds itself trapped by its rhetoric of unwavering support and its dependence on the US, now exposed as unreliable in this conflict, leading to a catastrophic collective failure of statesmanship with potentially devastating consequences for Ukraine. Russia's advantage production strategy and rejecting ceasefire. Russia currently holds a decisive advantage in the Ukraine conflict, underpinned by its ability to outproduce the West militarily. NATO Secretary General Jens Stoltenberg himself stated Russia manufactures more artillery shells in 3 months than all NATO allies combined can produce in a year. This massive production ramped up contrasts sharply with the US and Europe's struggles. Militarily, Russian forces are making steady, significant advances on multiple fronts, claiming full control of Lugansk region, capturing key parts of Warshans and nearly all of the strategic town of Chasiv Yar, and threatening Ukrainian forces near Pokrovsk with encirclement. Advanced south of Zaporizhzhia city also bring Russian artillery closer to a major Ukrainian hub. Russia firmly rejects any talk of a ceasefire, as Kremlin spokesman Dmitry Peskov stated. Pausing an offensive when holding the initiative makes no strategic sense. Russia views ceasefire as tools for the enemy to regroup and rearm. Previous European ultimatums demanding an immediate ceasefire were dismissed, with Russia instead proposing direct peace talk on its term. Russia's position has also hardened since earlier negotiations. It now explicitly opposes Ukrainian EU memberships, viewing the bloc as a military rival, and demands reflect territorial gains made since talks last stalled. Russia perceived the US weapons halt as confirmation of its strategy's success and Western weakness. The failed sanctions strategy and Trump's pragmatism. Efforts to force Russia into a ceasefire through devastating new economic sanctions have failed due to the risk of severe backlash, particularly impacting the US economy. Proposals like those from US Senators Lindsey Graham and Richard Blumenthal involve imposing massive tariffs on any country buying Russian oil, aiming to cripple Russia's income. However, President Trump strongly opposed this approach. He understands such sanctions would drastically reduce global oil supply, causing prices to skyrocket and triggering renewed inflation in the US. This scenario, similar to the energy cost surge that damaged the previous administration, poses a direct threat to Trump's domestic political standing and economic goals. Furthermore, enforcing these sanctions could disrupt global trade, causing shortage of goods in US stores. Trump's administration has shown a clear preference for relaxing sanctions rather than imposing new ones, easing restrictions on Russian nuclear projects in Hungary and granting China waivers to keep buying Iranian oil. The Iran-Israel crisis further demonstrates Trump's pragmatism. Reports that Iran was preparing to mine the Strait of Hormuz, threatening 20% of global oil supply, caused him to rapidly shift from confrontation to agreeing a ceasefire. This aversion to actions spiking oil price fundamentally blocks the sanctions strategy intended to pressure Russia into a ceasefire over Ukraine. The path to peace, Istanbul versus escalating demands. The only viable path to ending the war lies in Ukraine agreeing to restart peace talks, based on the term Russia outlined in the Istanbul process, specifically the memorandum presented by Moscow. However, this path has become significantly harder. Firstly, Ukraine's military position is far weaker now than during earlier talks, with critical weapon support withdrawn and Russian forces controlling more territory, including potential all of Lugansk. Secondly, Russia's demands have increased. Crucially, Russian officials like Deputy Foreign Minister Alexander Rusko now explicitly state that Ukrainian membership in the European Union crosses a red line. Russia no longer views the EU as a purely economic bloc, but as a geopolitical and evolving military project aligned against it. This is a significant hardening from earlier position. Furthermore, Russia warned that if Ukraine rejected the territorial realities at the time of the Istanbul talks, future demands would increase as Russia captured more land. With advances in Donetsk and elsewhere continuing, any new Russian territorial demands in negotiations would be more extensive than before. Agreeing to talk now would mean Ukraine accepting negotiations from its weakest position yet, facing Russia's toughest demands so far. The alternative, however, appears to be continued territorial loss and devastation. The battlefield reality. Russian advances accelerate. The situation on the ground in Ukraine continues to deteriorate rapidly for Ukrainian forces. Exacerbated by the US weapon halt, Russian offensives are yielding results on multiple axes. East Donetsk, Russian forces claim full control of Lugansk region. They have secured significant part of Volchansk, particularly north of the Volsha River, and report encountering weak Ukrainian defenses. The strategic town of Chasiv Yar is now largely under Russian control, with only a few outlying districts holding out. Advances beyond Chasiv Yar have already begun. Pokrovsk, Donetsk, this sector is witnessing particularly intense pressure. Russian forces control parts of northeastern Novokonomishny and are pushing towards the village of Yasnobrodivka. They are also close to capturing the village of Prorish, west of Kyiv supply hub of Krasnohorivka. Combined advance threatened to encircle Ukraine forces around Pokrovsk, reminiscent of the siege of Mariupol, potentially forcing a retreat. South Zaporizhzhia. Russian troops have secured most of the village of Mala Tokmashka, south of the major city of Zaporizhzhia. This brings them within artillery range of the city's outskirts. Advances continue westward toward Zaporizhzhia from other directions as well. These relentless pushes, coupled with severe Ukrainian shortage of artillery shell and manpower, make stabilizing the front line increasingly difficult. The withdrawal of critical U.S. air defense missiles also leave Ukrainian cities and infrastructure more vulnerable to Russian missiles and drone strikes, like recent attacks on Poltava and Zhytomyr. The shadow of organized crime. Russia-Azerbaijan tensions. Recent friction between Russia and Azerbaijan, including arrests of Russians in Baku and angry statements, stems from Russian police actions in Ural Mountain region. Reliable sources indicate Russian authority arrested individuals linked to powerful Azerbaijani organized crime networks operating in the Ural. These networks were reportedly involved in illicit activities and, crucially, were suspected of gathering or trading sensitive information about Russia's vast military and industrial complex located in the region, including major facilities like the tank plant in Nizhny Tagil. The arrest angered these influential networks, who pressured the Azerbaijani government to retaliate by arresting Russians and issue strong protests, likely aiming to force a prisoner swap. Additionally, Russia was reportedly furious over evidence suggesting Azerbaijan allowed Israel to use its airspace for strikes on Iran, like discovery of dropped fuel tanks in the Caspian Sea. Russia's recent strikes on Ukrainian oil refinery processing Azerbaijani oil further strained relations, reaching an earlier tacit understanding. While tense resolution is expected through talk involving Putin, Azerbaijani President Aliyev, and his key ally, Turkish President Erdogan, likely resulting in a deal involving exchange and undisclosed security guarantees. Historical context. U.S. industrial limits exposed. The U.S. failure to sustain weapon supplies to Ukraine reveals deeper issues with American military industrial capacity compared to past conflicts. During major wars like Korea 1950 to 53 and Vietnam roughly 1965 to 73, the U.S. mobilized its economy extensively. Militarily, spending reached 14% of GDP during Korea and 10% during Vietnam. Factories shifted to wartime production, turning out vast quantities of equipment ranging from advanced jets to relatively simple rifles and ammunition. Crucially, a significant portion of this output consists of weapons that were effective but could be produced quickly and in large numbers. Today, U.S. military spending is around 4% of GDP, and no comparable industrial mobilization occurred for Ukraine. Modern U.S. weapons are often highly complex and expensive, making rapid production scale-up difficult. As seen with Patriot missiles, even increasing output of basic 155mm artillery shells proved challenging. The nature of the U.S. industrial base has also changed, arguably losing some capacity for mass production. This combination, lack of mobilization, complex weaponry, and industrial constraint meant the U.S. could not indefinitely supply a high-intensity conflict like Ukraine without critically depleting its own stocks, a vulnerability now starkly exposed. The broader geopolitical shift, the U.S. weapon cutoff to Ukraine signifies more than just a policy shift. It reflects a broader recalibration of global power dynamics. The inability of the world's sole superpower to sustain a proxy conflict against Russia, despite not committing its own troops, demonstrate practical limits to U.S. military hegemony. Russia's ability to mobilize its industry, withstand sanctions, and maintain battlefield initiative contrasts sharply with Western struggles. China's massive industrial output, particularly in shipbuilding and missile development, further highlights this shift. The public U.S. admission of weapons shortage is a gift to Moscow and Beijing, validating their long-held assertions about American overstretch. It signals to other nations globally that U.S. security guarantees have tangible limits. The focus shifting to China underscores the recognition in Washington that long-term strategic competition lies in the Pacific, not Europe. This episode in Ukraine may be remembered as the moment the post-Cold War unipolar world definitely fractured, moving toward a more multipolar, contested system where U.S. power, while immense, is no longer seen as limitless or unchallengeable. The failure of Europe to act decisively without the U.S. further underscored this transition. Many of my listeners, like 70%, haven't subscribed to my YouTube channel, and so many of you don't even know that you haven't subscribed. That is actually what makes the show going. It's almost like you're making a charity donation to the show. So that's why I ask again and again, because it enables us to grow and grow and grow, and we're going for the long haul here. And listen, if this is your first time listening to Sokhain Rich, you don't have to subscribe. You guys, your first one's on me. But if you have watched this show before, it's like you are a freeloader now. So all I would ask you is, if you have seen this show before and you like it, help me. Help my team here. Hit the subscribe button and we will continue to build the show for you. That I swear. Thank you to all of you guys who have subscribed. It means a lot to me. Now hit that subscribe and like button now. Thank you. That's all for me for today. I will see you soon. Bye for now.